So people tend to know going in that studying evolution can be something of a guilt trip. Doesn't matter how much you know about the current mass extinction or Holocene, unless you spend your life in a box at the bottom of the garden, you'll know that human beings are a huge reason that so many unique animals and plants are now extinct. And the truth is, a lot of the time, we don't realise what we've done until it is too late. No one cared much about the dodo until we ate them all. The Steller sea cow wasn't such a textbook superstar until we ate them all, and the woolly mammoth only got famous after we ate them all. Damn, we're hungry, eh? It can be easy to fall down the rabbit hole of, if only we had a second chance with these creatures, if only we found a few still alive, we'd put so much effort into saving them now, wouldn't we? But we don't get second chances when it comes to extinction. Or do we? Trick question. No, today I'm going to share with you the story of an animal that waddled back from the dead just last century. This is the story of how we got that rare second chance, grabbed onto it, and made good. New Zealand's evolutionary history is very interesting. As a country, it split away from the larger landmass, Gondwanaland, around 85 million years ago. It remained almost completely isolated from the rest of the world for millennia, getting settled by humans a mere 800 years ago. That's a blink of the eye in historical terms, let alone biological. New Zealand is best known for its extraordinary number of bird species. Aside from two cute little fruit bats, no mammals existed on the island until the Maori first settled here in around 1200 AD. So what occurred on a huge scale was a phenomenon called adaptive radiation. You might have heard of the most famous example of this, Darwin's finches on the Galapagos Islands. They're all descended from a common ancestor, which was probably either blown onto the island or ended up there on a sea raft, we're not really sure. Anyway, as there was so little competition and so many different food sources, the finches radiated, in evolutionary terms, into a variety of different species, each one adapted to a different role in the ecosystem. We call these roles biological niches. In New Zealand, because there are virtually no mammals, this opens up a huge amount of niches for birds to fill instead. You've definitely heard of their flagship bird, the kiwi. He fills a similar niche to hedgehogs, so much so that a lot of zoologists call him an honorary mammal. But you may not have heard of our subject for today. This brings me, finally I hear you say, to the takahe. The takahe is a curious bird. It's the largest railbird in the world and weighs around 3 kilograms. It's pretty distinctive. It sits around 50 centimetres tall, with quite stocky red legs, a big red bill, and gorgeous purple-blue feathers. Their wings are pretty reduced at this stage, as they are flightless birds. Yeah, flightless, plump poultry. This is going to go well. Takahe live long, monogamous lives. They take a few years to reach maturity, and once they mate, they stay with their partner from 12 years to usually their entire lives, which can be between 14 and 20 years. While sometimes called vegetarians, I describe them as more opportunistic, sort of like a pescatarian, just one foot in the door. They mostly do feed on grasses, but have been known to snag insects like weta, and in rare cases even smaller birds and lizards. Their closest relation is the common pukeko. They're kind of like you versus that girl you were jealous of in school. The pukeko is a skinnier, sluttier version of the takahe. They also did seem to get the best out of the evolutionary lottery, as they can fly, unlike the takahe, breed like rabbits, and according to some, they are, and I quote, underrated as table fare. Takahe can lay 1 to 3 eggs every October, usually 2, and after 30 days of incubation, their chicks hatch. They stay in the nest for about a week, and then will begin to follow their parents, begging for food. Takahe travel in small family units, and aren't particularly quick to alarm, a common side effect of having few natural predators while they're evolving. Unfortunately, all of these factors, their slow path to maturity, the small number of eggs per year, and the lack in fear response, have contributed to their decline over the years. Even looking similar to the pukeko can be a downside. Twice in the last 10 years, takahe have been shot by hunters trying to pick off the wrong bird. Very embarrassing. There have been 2 steep drops in takahe population history, one pre-European settlement and one afterwards. In the times before European settlement, people have argued that glacial melting caused destruction in the takahe's habitats, as well as hunting by colonising Polynesians and their dogs. Once the Europeans arrived, it's the same story as with many New Zealand birds. Stoats hunted them mercilessly, and the introduction of red deer caused significant competition for resources. And as we know from high school biology, two species cannot sustainably occupy the same niche. All of this was such great pressure on the takahe that numbers declined all over New Zealand. The North Island takahe is extinct, last seen in 1894, and the South Island relations were driven up into the Murchison Mountains, where they quietly remained ever since. The whole world believed them extinct, wiped off the face of our planet like so many others. Now, it might be an obvious assumption that most great scientific discoveries are done by great scientists, people who have been trained in that field to know what to look for. But the rediscovery of the takahe shows us that all you really need to make a difference is determination, and possibly a bit of obsession. Dr. Geoffrey Buckland Orbell was born in 1908 near Oamaru, and graduated with a medical degree from Otago University. For 46 years, he practiced as an ear, eye, nose and throat doctor, but since his school days he'd always been fascinated by the mysterious lost railbird. These days, people might have called him something of a conspiracy theorist. Circumstantial evidence convinced him that if the bird still existed, it must be in the Murchison Mountains. And if they were, then someone had to find them. And why not him? In April 1948, he and a group of friends headed out on a search party. They found some tracks and left as it grew dark. In November of the same year, I don't really know why they waited so long, but some people have jobs, I suppose. Anyway, in November of the same year, they went out once again and finally found their prize, taking some gorgeous colour footage. You can see it on YouTube if you like. He described them as no more perturbed than hens, rediscovering their placid nature. He brought this news back to the politicians and activist groups of New Zealand, who were shocked and amazed to hear of it. So shocked and amazed, in fact, that they did nothing. For 10 years. Some people believed that the birds needed to be left alone to work out their own destiny, while others panicked that they were going to see another extinction. Like, obviously. Some sources even cite a desire to avoid conflict as a reason for this delay, which I personally think is enforcing a lot of unhelpful stereotypes. But if you want my 2 cents, it always comes down to the same thing: resources and an unwillingness to spend them. However, in the early 1980s, a serious decline in takahe numbers was identified, giving us the kick up the arse we needed and supporting a major conservation push to protect them. Biologists at the New Zealand Department of Conservation, or DOC, drew on their now world-renowned skill at designing remote island sanctuaries, and translocated birds onto 4 different islands, while making efforts to monitor and protect the ones left in the Murchison Mountains. So I can't really stress this enough. An important thing to remember in conservation is that good intentions still need resources to make a difference. Government departments like DOC would need a huge amount of money to achieve all they have without sponsorships. In this case, they're working with a hardware company called Mitre 10 in a symbiotic relationship to help bring back the takahe population. And buy helicopters. And guns. See, this is what I tell people, yet more evidence that working in conservation is basically exactly like being James Bond. Pretty much every way. Anyway, among other strategies, the teams have implemented many of the same techniques as are used with kiwi to help bring back up their numbers. These include removing infertile eggs from nests and rearing chicks in centres, waiting until maturity before releasing them back into the wild. Just one thing to note, when rearing chicks, DOC workers use takahe hand puppets to keep the birds from getting too tame. This isn't exactly groundbreaking, but it's a lovely image, so I thought I'd share. You're welcome. The guns and helicopters come into use when dealing with the red deer population, which are kept under control by shooting them from the helicopters. Stoats are also controlled by setting down traps and poisons, but occasionally disasters do happen. In 2007, following a mass seeding of beech trees and tussocks, which does happen every few years, the mountains were beset by stoats, and within a few months the wild population had halved. This shows just how invaluable those island sanctuaries are. In a very clear way, they are our insurance against this kind of disaster. Since then, efforts have gone remarkably well, with takahe numbers increasing on average by 10% per year. This is helped by the fact that they are so chill. Usually, a big danger in translocating birds is that the stress of it can delay breeding and even cause health problems, but for the takahe, nope, they don't give a damn. A study by Ian G. Jamieson and G. Craig Wilson showed that, and I'm quoting directly here, The results indicated that translocated birds did not delay first breeding compared with resident birds, and there were no significant differences in hatching and fledgling success between resident and translocated breeders in their first breeding season. Doc Ranger Glenn Greaves, who has been working with the Takahe recovery program for years, says that the wild population holds the most valuable birds in terms of genetics and learned behaviours. And this touches on another common problem with bringing up endangered populations. You've got a pretty small gene pool to work with. This means that the sex lives of Takahe are rarely private. Birds are often shifted between islands to avoid inbreeding, which could make the population a bit more vulnerable. In October 2017, Greaves gave an interview celebrating the Takahe population making it to 100 breeding pairs, and a total population of 347 birds. Now that the numbers are up to a relatively high state, the focus is on creating new wild populations in areas where the Takahe once existed. March of 2018 saw the reintroduction of 18 birds into Takahe National Park, and there's now a drive coordinated between Doc and Fulton Hogan to create an entirely predator-free New Zealand by 2050. For me, coming from Britain, it's a little strange to see so many resources and so much time being poured into conservation by the government. It could be easy to idealise the New Zealand government and people, and while they are absolutely doing an amazing job, we do have to remember one thing. The government actions what the people are interested in. A huge amount of tourism coming to New Zealand is ecotourism, people coming to see these amazing creatures, and there's a huge push all over the country to keep this interest going among citizens as well. Just from where I live in Wellington, you can see advertisements for national parks, the Kakapo ink tattoo studios, graffiti of endemic species all over town. There's Tuatara beer and Tui beer, and even a craft beer called Takahe XBA. The tagline being, and I'm not making this up, "It's back after 3 years of battling stoats." Even the colloquial nicknames for New Zealanders, Kiwis, comes from their flagship endangered species. The Takahe is a success story. And while there is still a lot of work to be done, it's something that I make sure to remember when I hear, for instance, about the Yahtzee river dolphin being rediscovered too late, or the northern white rhino finally going extinct. Humans are capable of a lot of destruction, it's true, but if we're driven and passionate and aware, we can really achieve some incredible things. And then name beers after them.